All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're putting on our gloves
Okay.
and diving into the world of elite soccer goalkeeping.
Okay.
Specifically, we're exploring a training approach that you might not expect,
Right.
weightlifting for goalkeepers. Our single source for this deep dive is an article from LPS Athletic. They're a performance training center, and they're really pushing this idea that weightlifting is like the key to being a dominant goalkeeper.
Mm.
So we're going to unpack why they believe this, what kind of weightlifting they recommend, and how it all connects to what happens on the field. Are you ready to jump in?
Yeah, for sure. Um, it's definitely an interesting approach. And I think to understand why LPS Athletic is so focused on weightlifting,
Right.
you got to understand what it really takes to be a goalkeeper. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I mean, when you really think about it, goalkeeping, it's unlike any other position on the field. You're the last line of defense, right? You're the one that has to stop the other team from scoring. You need incredible reflexes, crazy fast decision making, and the mental toughness to just shake off any mistakes and instantly refocus.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most demanding thing about being a goalkeeper?
I think it's got to be all the different things a keeper has to be good at. It's not just the physical stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you need the strength to make those saves and jump for those high balls.
Yeah.
But this article from LPS breaks it down even more.
Right.
And they say a top-level goalkeeper needs absolute strength, reactive ability, explosive power, and then there's strength endurance, mobility, mental toughness, and even cognitive awareness.
Wow, that's a long list.
It is.
So where does weightlifting fit in with all of this?
Right.
Because when I think weightlifting, I think of someone trying to get as big as possible,
Yeah.
not someone who needs to be quick and agile like a goalkeeper.
I think that's a pretty common misunderstanding. Building mass is definitely a goal for some people,
Uh-huh.
but weightlifting, when you're talking about the real deal, it's about way more than size.
Okay.
And LPS specifically talks about two main lifts, the snatch and the clean and jerk. Have you ever seen those done?
I've seen some clips, yeah. But to be honest, I don't really get all the technical stuff.
Oh, sure.
What makes these lifts so special?
So what's interesting about them is how explosive and full body they are. Imagine like a chain reaction of power starting in your legs, going through your hips, and ending in this powerful upward movement. It's called triple extension.
Okay.
And those movements,
Mm-hmm.
they take speed, coordination, and crazy power generation.
Triple extension. That makes me think of a superhero,
Yeah.
getting ready to jump super high or throw a huge punch.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And the really cool part is those movements are basically exactly what goalkeepers do in games. Like when a goalkeeper jumps to tip a ball over the crossbar or dives for a save,
Right.
they're using that explosive power that comes from the ground up.
Oh, okay. So you're saying even though it's heavy lifting, it helps with that super fast movement a goalkeeper needs.
Exactly.
Interesting.
When you dive for a ball, it's all about how fast you can create power.
Yeah.
And the snatch and the clean and jerk, they train your body to do just that. They're like the foundation, and then there are variations like pulls to build strength in your back, hangs that focus on power, and even like bottoms-up jerks for those super athletes who are working on shoulder strength and core stability.
Gotcha. So LPS is really into these snatch and clean and jerk movements for goalkeepers.
Yeah.
Are they saying to ditch every other type of training and just focus on those weightlifting moves?
Not exactly. They're very clear about the difference between weightlifting and what they call traditional resistance training. Think about that as isolating individual muscles.
Yeah.
Like bicep curls, tricep extensions, planks. You've probably seen those or maybe even tried them yourself.
Oh, yeah. Definitely done some bicep curls in my day. So what's wrong with those exercises?
Well, they're not necessarily bad. It's more that they're not enough on their own. If you want to reach peak goalkeeper performance, remember their motto is legs feed the wolf. They're all about that lower body strength. And the best way to build that is through compound movements, like squats.
Squats. Yeah, those are the king of leg exercises.
They are.
What makes them so important?
Squats work a ton of muscle groups all at once, including those crucial leg muscles. LPS really likes deep squats.
Okay.
And they say, and this might surprise you, that they're actually good for your knees.
Really?
Yeah, because it's something called the wrapping effect. Basically, when you squat deep, you increase the contact area in your knee joint,
Okay.
which means the force is distributed better and you're building strength in all the muscles and tendons around your knee.
Gotcha.
They're saying those isolation exercises, while not useless, they just aren't enough for a goalkeeper to hit their full potential.
So those isolation exercises are fine as extras, but the main focus should be on weightlifting and squats. Right.
But does any research actually support this?
That's the big question,
Yeah.
right? And luckily, there is some research that can help us understand this. This article mentions a study from Tunisia that compared weightlifting to plyometrics and traditional resistance training. What they found was that weightlifting led to way bigger improvements in vertical jump height, how far people could broad jump, acceleration, balance, and isokinetic power.
So it's not just about being strong, it's about being able to use that strength fast, right?
Exactly.
Does that mean someone who can, like, bench press a ton might not be the best goalkeeper?
You got it. Isokinetic power is basically how much power you can generate really quickly.
Okay,
Think about pushing off explosively to make a diving save. That's isokinetic power.
makes sense.
So while being able to bench press a lot is cool, it doesn't directly translate to the power you need for those quick movements on the field.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Is there any other research that supports this? Actually, there is. There's another study, this one from Australia, and it looked at the difference between experienced and novice weightlifters.
Okay.
What they found was that even just 3 times a week of power clean variations, snatch pulls, and squat jumps led to improvements in rate of force development, peak force, and impulse.
What is impulse?
It's basically how well you can transfer force to something, like pushing off the ground for a dive.
Gotcha.
So basically, all signs are pointing to weightlifting leading to more power.
Yeah, definitely seeing a trend here.
Right.
But hold on, before we get too excited, I remember this article had a big warning about all of this.
Yes.
They weren't saying that weightlifting was the only thing that mattered.
Exactly, and that's a really important point.
Yeah.
They're not saying weightlifting alone will make you a better athlete. It's more like it gives you the tools, the strength, the power, the explosiveness.
Okay.
But you still got to build the house.
Yeah.
You need that sport-specific training to turn those raw abilities into real skills on the field. It's important to keep that in mind as we look at what they're suggesting.
So it's like having a powerful engine, but still needing to know how to drive the car.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Okay.
It's about bridging that gap between strength and actual soccer skills. Think of it as like a pyramid. At the bottom, you have those basic moves, the squats, snatches, clean and jerks. Those build the strength, power, and explosiveness we were just talking about.
Okay, I'm picturing this pyramid now. We've got a strong base. What's next?
So as you go up the pyramid, you start doing more specific movements that are similar to what a goalkeeper actually does in a game. Think plyometrics, things like box jumps, depth jumps, lateral downs. Those use that base strength and train your body to react fast and powerfully in different directions.
That's interesting. So we're basically taking that power from weightlifting and turning it into movements that are specific to what a keeper needs to do. What's higher up on the pyramid?
Even more sport-specific stuff. Things like dive drills, reaction drills, agility courses that mimic game situations. All of that helps you fine-tune your movements and work on the technical aspects of being a keeper, like hand positioning, footwork, and decision-making.
I like this pyramid analogy. It's like we're adding on the skills layer by layer, all built on that strong base we made with the weightlifting, and then it all comes together at the top of the pyramid, the game itself.
Right.
So it's not just about lifting weights, it's a whole system that trains every part of being a goalkeeper. What would you say is the most important takeaway from LPS's approach?
I think the biggest thing is how much they stress having a holistic approach. This LPS article really drives home the point that building strength isn't some separate thing you do. It's a crucial part of becoming a great goalkeeper. It requires a change in how both coaches and athletes think about training.
Why do you think this approach isn't more popular if the benefits are so clear?
That's a good question. I think there are a few reasons. One is probably just tradition. Soccer training is always focused on endurance and ball skills, with strength training kind of taking a back seat.
Yeah, that makes sense. Lots of running, lots of drills, really focusing on those sport-specific skills.
Exactly.
Maybe not enough focus on building strength as that foundation. What else do you think is holding people back?
The other reason is probably that misconception we were talking about, the idea that weightlifting will make you big and slow.
Yeah.
But as we've seen from the research, weightlifting, when done right, actually makes you faster and more agile. It makes you more explosive and powerful as an athlete.
And of course, there's the safety concern. These weightlifting moves are pretty complicated, and there's always a risk of getting hurt if you're not doing them correctly.
Yeah,
I bet that makes some coaches nervous.
for sure. And that's why LPS emphasizes the importance of having an expert watching over you, especially when you're first learning the movements.
Yeah.
A good coach can guide you through the proper steps, make sure you're using good form, and minimize the risk of injury.
It sounds like it takes a real commitment, not just buying equipment, but also having a really knowledgeable coach.
Yes.
Is it worth the effort?
LPS says the potential benefits outweigh the costs.
Hmm.
They believe that by building that foundation of strength and power, you're not just getting better at the game.
Right.
You're actually making yourself less likely to get hurt.
That's a big claim. What makes him say that?
Well, there's more and more research showing that strength training, when done right, can improve things like joint stability, muscle balance, and even bone density. All those things help prevent injuries.
So it's not just about being stronger. It's about being tougher
Yeah,
and more able to withstand all the demands of the sport.
that's it. And when you consider everything a goalkeeper has to do, those explosive movements, the impacts, the constant changes of direction,
Right.
being tough becomes super important if you want to stay healthy and play at a high level.
LPS seems to be pushing for a whole new way of thinking about how to train goalkeepers. Instead of that old school focus on endurance and ball skills, they're saying we should start with strength and power as the foundation for everything else. Do you think this could really work?
I think it definitely could. There's still a lot to learn, but the early research is promising. It suggests that this approach could totally change how goalkeepers train and how well they perform. It's not just about getting bigger muscles.
Okay.
It's about reaching a whole new level of performance, both physically and mentally.
It would be great to hear what LPS has to say about how to actually do this in a real training environment.
Yeah.
Do they give any advice on putting this philosophy into action?
Luckily for us, they do. The article gets into quite a bit of detail about that. They have some specific suggestions for coaches and athletes who want to add this kind of training into their program.
Perfect. Let's get into that in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
We'll take a closer look at how to actually include weightlifting in a goalkeeper's training routine. All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We've been really digging into LPS Athletic's philosophy on weightlifting for goalkeepers over these last two segments. Understanding why they believe it's so important for reaching that top level of performance.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's time to get practical. How do we actually put all of this into practice?
Right. Got to make it work in the real world.
Exactly.
Luckily, the LPS article gives us some solid advice on how to include weightlifting into a goalkeeper's training routine.
Before we jump into the details, though,
Sure.
is there a standard program that all goalkeepers should follow, or does it change based on the individual?
That's a great question, and LPS really stresses that there's no one-size-fits-all program. The specific program depends on a bunch of things, the athlete's age, how much experience they have, their training history, and obviously what their goals are.
Yeah.
What works for a pro goalkeeper who's been training for years might be totally different from what's good for a young athlete just starting out.
So it's not just okay, everyone go lock heavy weights. It's got to be personalized.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you give us an example of how this might work in real life?
Definitely. Let's say we have a young goalkeeper who's pretty new to weightlifting. A good place to start would be building some basic strength and making sure they can move correctly. Think bodyweight exercises like squats, lunges, push-ups. Those help build that foundation without adding the complexity of weights.
Starting with the fundamentals, mastering those basic movements before moving on.
That's the idea.
What's next? What happens once they've got those down?
Once they're good with those bodyweight movements,
Okay.
then we could start introducing them to the barbell. We'd start with relatively simple movements like the overhead press and the deadlift.
Okay.
And we'd be super focused on proper technique.
Yeah.
As they get better, we can gradually increase the weight, but form is always the most important thing.
Sounds like a very careful process, easing them into those more complex weightlifting moves, like the snatch and the clean and jerk.
Yeah.
When do they start incorporating those exercises?
As they progress and show they can handle the barbell with good technique and control, we can start introducing variations of the snatch and the clean and jerk.
Okay.
But even then, we're still prioritizing good form over how much weight they're lifting. It's about building that control and developing the explosiveness those movements require.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm guessing they wouldn't just be doing weightlifting. They'd also be doing some of those more sport-specific exercises we talked about.
Right.
Plyometrics, agility drills, things like that.
Of course. It's about putting all of these different pieces together into a program that covers every aspect of how a goalkeeper performs. Remember that pyramid we talked about?
Yep.
Weightlifting is the base.
Yeah.
But as you move up, you start adding in those more specialized, sport-specific movements to tune those raw abilities into real skills.
Right. We've talked a lot about the physical side of weightlifting for goalkeepers.
Yeah.
But what about the mental side of things? Does weightlifting affect that too?
It's an interesting connection, and LPS does talk about it in the article. Think about what it takes to lift something heavy.
Okay.
You need focus, determination, and you got to push through discomfort. Those same mental skills are essential for goalkeeping, staying calm under pressure, making quick decisions, being able to bounce back from tough moments.
Yeah, totally.
So in a way, there's a mental link between weightlifting and playing on the field.
So you're saying there's this mental training that happens while you're doing those lifts?
Right.
Interesting.
Like a hidden benefit.
Does LPS suggest any specific ways to train these mental skills?
While they don't go into too much detail on specific techniques, they do say it's important to include mental training in the overall program. This could be things like visualization, mindfulness, or even working with a sports psychologist to develop coping mechanisms for handling pressure.
It makes sense. After all, being a goalkeeper is as much a mental game as it is a physical one. Do you think that feeling of knowing you can handle a physical challenge, like lifting a heavy weight,
Yeah.
might actually boost a goalkeeper's confidence on the field?
I think that's very possible. Knowing you're strong and capable can definitely give you a mental edge.
Right?
You might be more likely to go for those tough balls, dive into a crowd, really command your area.
It's like that feeling of, I can handle this. It's not just about physical strength. It's about that confidence that comes from knowing you're prepared.
Exactly.
And that confidence can spread to the rest of the team, right?
Yeah,
It can inspire your teammates, maybe even make your opponents a little intimidated.
you got it. And that's what I find so fascinating about this whole approach.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about one player doing well. It's about the potential to change the whole team's energy.
This deep dive into weightlifting for goalkeepers has been really eye-opening. I feel like we've gone beyond just the how-to and really explored the why behind LPS Athletics ideas.
Me too.
It's been great to break this down with you.
Likewise.
I think LPS ends the article with a really interesting question. What if this focus on building strength and power wasn't just for goalkeepers?
Right.
What if every athlete trained this way in every sport?
That's a really big idea. Makes you think about how much potential we could unlock if we all trained with this level of focus and intention.
Totally. Maybe that's something we can explore in a future deep dive.
I'm in.
Thanks for joining us today, everyone. And remember, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.